Hi, guys.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How are you guys?
Pretty good.
Good.
There's one more of you, right?
Yeah, I don't think he'll be able to make it today, so it might just be me and Anthony.
Yeah.
And what was his name again?
Cody Cannon.
Cody. He's the one I actually met, right?
No, that's me, Jake.
Oh, that was you. Okay.
All good. It was a while ago.
I thought I remembered you looking more had more hair and.
So it's funny you say that actually, because this even happened at New York Comic Con. Me and him were both big guys with big dark curly hair. I just got my hair cut like a month ago.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, when I met you, I did have more hair and it was big. And
gotcha.
Curly. He also has dark curly hair too. So.
Cool. Well, good to see you again.
Thank you. Yeah, you too, man.
Yeah.
Appreciate you coming on, man.
So it was Tony and Jake, right?
Yep. Yes, sir.
Yes.
All right. Perfect.
Yeah. So it's pretty chill. We're a pretty chill podcast, honestly. You don't have to smoke weed. We don't. Sometimes we get high. Sometimes whatever. It's just a.
Yeah, I think I mentioned to you when we were chatting that I probably wouldn't smoke on the pod just because I'm liable to get myself in trouble saying something crazy. You know.
No worries.
I totally understand. Yeah. We do it all the
time. Are you guys high right now?
I'm not actually. I am.
Okay.
Anthony, are you?
Yeah, I hit the bong earlier.
Oh shit.
All right, good. Well, cheers. Yeah.
I know. It's been a while. I think my asthma has been acting up, so it's been like a few weeks since I've actually smoked weed. So.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that.
It's been a few minutes for me, Jake. Sorry.
Well, thank you for coming on. I guess I'll get right into the intro and we can discuss your stuff. Welcome to Comics and Chronic, everyone. I'm one of your hosts, Jacob H. Joining me is fellow co-host Anthony Iannaccio. Cody Cannon cannot be here today, but we are joined by another guest. He's the writer of such comics as Cody, published by Dark Horse, art by Robert Samlin, if I'm saying that correct.
Yeah, close enough.
Sorry. As well as Undying Love, art by Tom Coker. And he currently just came out with volume 3 of his very own original graphic novel, Birdking. Please welcome writer Daniel Freedman.
Welcome.
How you guys doing? Yeah.
Pretty good, man.
Doing
good. So I was telling Anthony that, you know, I met you at LA Comic Con and I was just wandering around and your table specifically caught my eye because I hadn't read your stuff beforehand, but when I saw your table, I was like, oh, this looks cool. So I bought Undying Love and I bought Kali, and then you were telling me about Birdking, and Kali was dope. I read that, very much enjoyed it. So yeah, I'm just glad I discovered you because I never would have, had I not bumped into you, I never would have seen it. And now I feel like I have a whole new cool creator to look into.
Yeah, no, that's kind of what's so great about the cons, right? I mean, that's why you do them, is to find new readers and meet new people and hopefully connect over that kind of thing. So
how do you like the con experience? Is it like an enjoyable thing for you?
Each con is different.
Yeah.
I do LA Comic Con every year. That seems to be like a good show. Like it's a good medium-sized show. The crowd's good. People buy stuff and it's got good vibes. Like it's really like there's every kind of person you could imagine goes to LA Comic Con. Kids, old people, everything in between. And it has good vibes. So that con I do enjoy. Like I have done San Diego, and I generally, like the past couple of years, will just do a single signing, like at the Dark Horse booth in San Diego. Mm-hmm. And that show is so big, everything kind of sucks in San Diego. Like you think it's going to be so cool because it's the big show. There's like 200,000 people coming through. But it doesn't really matter who you are. At least, for me, you just get lost in the mix there. And so that show ends up being like not that fulfilling and kind of like, I like the medium-sized shows because you get a good vibe, you get a good crowd, and those are enjoyable. And people actually are out there to kind of meet creators and find new stuff, and they're more open to it. San Diego's, everyone's got an agenda there trying to find, this signature or this random book, or they're trying to make a panel or whatever. So it's, different shows are for different things. I've done like really small shows, and those are interesting. Usually you'll get like one guy that hangs around the table just like way too long, like because there's not that many tables, and so I'm just going to hang with you all day, and so you got to kind of figure out how to get rid of those guys. But otherwise the con experience is great. I don't do that many shows, but that helps keep it great. I think if I did do shows like tour like other guys do, it might get a little exhausting. But I like doing LA because it's the local show. It's my local show. So
yeah, you're from LA, right?
Yeah. I'm one of the few natives born and raised. So
nice. I'm a transplant. I'm from New York, but I moved out here like 9 years ago.
Okay. All right. So very good.
I'm a fraud.
Yeah, it's cool. You know, all welcome.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, no, it's funny. I feel that way about the cons too. I've never been to San Diego, but like even New York sometimes can be huge and overwhelming.
Yeah. New York is that like on the threshold of like being too big. Also, because like once the shows get to a certain size, like San Diego and even New York to a certain extent, they stop being about comics.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure. You know, especially San Diego's like, super toys, games, Hollywood movies, movies, TV shows. Comics end up being like every year there's like this, it's a smaller and smaller piece of the pie. And like Artist Alley always gets smaller and more pushed into the corner. And the joke for 10 years has been that like Artist Alley will be in the parking lot next year. And it won't even be in the convention hall. So that, that's the other thing that sucks about the big shows.
No, you're right. Artist Alley is always at the edge.
Yeah. And like I went last year and it's like, they're like the way they've laid out the tables, it's like impossible to like get around. It's like, it sucks. So yeah. San Diego sucks. I'll say that. Yeah. San Diego sucks. Yeah.
Nice. Well, speaking of movies and stuff, you are also a screenwriter, correct?
Yeah, more. In the past, I'm pretty focused on books these days. I kind of made a pretty hard pivot to focus on comics, like during COVID. And but yeah, I did about 10 years in the screenwriting trenches, and definitely have stories to tell and ups and downs. And I've got projects that have been in development for years. Undying Love has actually been in development for going on 12 years.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that because I know. I read that Warner Brothers bought it, right? Yeah,
so Warner's bought it originally. It's bounced around. We've almost made the movie like 7 times. We are like knock on wood, looking good for next year. Nice. But again, it's been 12 years, so we'll see if it actually shakes out. It would be nice after all this time for this fucking movie to get made. It's been a roller coaster because like we've had like actors attached and all the big stuff, and then one thing falls apart. It's like a house of cards. If one guy drops out and then the schedule gets screwed up, it's like the whole thing will fall apart. So it's So again, I don't know. Hopefully next year, we'll see. Knock on wood. We're almost there. Next year, it's like a couple weeks away. So
yeah,
that's really cool.
That's awesome.
So as a screenwriter, how did the transition to screenwriting to comic book writing affect you? Like, were there things that you had to unlearn, or were there things that actually you realized helped you a lot while writing a comic script? Even though they're similar, I know that they're very different.
Yeah. I mean, a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. My day job is an editor, film and video editor. And so I've cut features and music videos, commercials, everything. That's my day job. I've done that for going on 20 years now. And so I did that before I did any writing. And my comic book writing and my screenwriting have kind of always been in parallel, like Undying Love. That was my first book. I did that back in 2011. It was also my first script.
Oh, wow.
And so they've always been in concert with each other. But I would say more than anything, the video editing has sort of inspired both of them. Screenwriting's a lot more rules and kind of regulations in script and screenwriting, and you got to adhere to a lot of things and people's notes and studio mandates and all these other kind of things that don't really they aren't part of the creative process, but you have to make them part of the process, and they get in the way of developing your story. And so that's what I like about comics is you just get to be more, it's more pure in that way and free. And I have the control as opposed as to film screenwriting where it's, I'm never going to have the control. If I'm writing for something for a studio or something. So they, ironically, even though a screenplay is, for a visual medium, you're not really supposed to, quote unquote, supposed to write the visuals into the script. as opposed to like a comic. It was like you're literally writing the visuals into the script.
Right.
And so, so yeah, I mean, it's, I think everything affects everything. I do tend to be quite direct on the page with my comic scripts in terms of like paneling, shots, compositions, because that editing background for me, it really informs the my writing process. Because for me, the visual storytelling is the sequence of shots. It really does break down like that for me, and that's what I put in my scripts. And so, yeah. Again, column A, column B.
Nice. That's cool that your background in editing helps you write for the panelings of the comics and whatnot.
Yeah,
gives you shot for shot. That's
yeah. I mean, I got my start basically as an editor. I was going to film school, and I met Tom Coker, who had just come back from Paris and Romania, where he had just directed this horror movie for Lionsgate. And I didn't even know Tom's comic book background. He goes back to like the early Image days.
Oh wow!
In the 90s, doing like Gen 13 and the Max and all the nice. Stormwatch and all this stuff. And so I didn't even realize I was like sitting there with like this comic book veteran who had just happened to make this film. I ended up dropping out of film school to work on this film, and that's a whole story in and of itself. But that's how I met Tom. And so we sat in a room together for a whole year editing this horror movie. And when that was done, we had sort of, I guess, liked each other enough to develop something. And that's what became Undying Love. Awesome. And so that, I kind of like, I think, working with Tom really brought me into comics. And I never really necessarily I never thought I would, for some reason, like making a comic seemed even harder than making a movie when I was younger. Even though now I know it's quite the opposite. It's nearly impossible to get a movie made, but you can actually make a comic if you sit down and work with an artist and just produce the book. So yeah, I forgot what the question even was.
No, I was just talking how your editing background has helped you.
Oh yeah, my editing background. So yeah, it all started with Tom, and to this day we're friends and collaborators. So it's 20 years now.
Oh, nice. That's awesome. Very cool. So Birdking, we believe Volume 3 came out last Friday, correct?
Or Wednesday, yeah. But yeah,
Wednesday,
last week.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Last week. How does Birdking come about?
Birdking comes about. So I started working with the artist Crom. We did a book called Raiders in 2020, and that was how we met each other. I reached out to him because I liked his art on Instagram. We, I kind of pursued him for a little while and pitched him the story Raiders. He liked it enough to want to do it. And, so we did that. And then once that was done, we had such a good experience, and Dark Horse was, saying, you guys want to do another book? And that's where Birdking came from. So Crom came to me with the Birdking character designed. He had been designing the character for like a year, drawing him and developing his design, and came to me and said, we had such a good time on Raiders. Would you want to write the story for this Birdking character I've got? And he had a couple other characters like Bianca designed. And so it was kind of interesting. Like he came to me with a cast of characters. And so I took that cast, and then, we kind of developed the story from there. But that's how Birdking came to be.
Was anything fleshed out for the characters already, or were they just designs that you added story to?
Very loose connections. Like, Bianca was a blacksmith, and but there wasn't much more to her than that. And like, Birdking's background is still something that we're trying to keep a little bit ambiguous. I think it makes him a little more magical.
Yeah,
if you don't know everything about him. And so we know more than the reader does, but as far as like developing the process, they kind of started with the designs of the characters, and that really informed the world. Like we built the world around them.
That's cool.
And then developed the story from there. And then once we kind of had a good idea of what we wanted to do with those characters, I started scripting and ended up writing a lot more, I think, than Crom anticipated originally. So, because we're going into our 4th volume now, which will be the last volume.
Okay.
But
nice. Okay.
Yeah. So once it's all, and it was always designed, or the intention was always to make one single graphic novel. And so we've just been releasing it in volumes as we finish it. But ultimately, it will be like a single 500-page graphic novel.
Ooh,
okay.
And it'll live as one book once it's all said and done.
Very cool.
It definitely felt that way while reading it in a great way. I don't mean that as like a negative. Like each volume, I guess, doesn't really end, but like it makes me want to keep reading. And each story is contained in itself, which is cool. Like we're getting each part of Bianca's journey so far, which is great.
Especially because it feels like in the first two, especially like the first, there's like a very endearing childlike innocence with her, and it also just like I love like the contrast of this book compared to Undying Love and Kali. It's so much more wholesome and childlike.
I definitely think
stuff, but it's cool.
It's a dark fantasy story, but we definitely wanted to aim a little wider with our audience. Undying Love's pretty fucking violent, and Kali's like extremely violent, and there's limits to sort of the how many people want to read books like that. And also just, I think Crom's artwork has this whimsicalness to it.
For sure.
And that was stuff. So with Birdking, we definitely just kind of leaned into that. Also the nature of having like a young teenage protagonist, it ends up becoming, it can't really not be a coming of age story at that point once you're dealing with like a teenage girl, just a teenage character. So so we definitely leaned into the kind of the whimsicalness of it. And definitely tried to make it for, a wider readership or wider audience, but it's definitely still a dark fantasy story.
Oh yeah, no, it's great, and it's I'm assuming also, and I mean this in the best way, because are you a Lord of the Rings fan? Because it's got some Lord of the Rings vibes going.
For sure.
I mean, there's no getting around that, especially in volume 2.
Yeah.
I had sort of like written myself into a corner with in volume 2 with the going under the mountain thing. And I realized like once we were doing layouts, I was like, oh shit, this is just the Mines of Moria. Like, which is my favorite like sequence in the Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
And so we just decided to kind of lean into that and just be like, let's just make this the Lord of the Rings chapter.
No, it was awesome.
And because there's no denying that like Lord of the Rings is a big, influence on both of us. I wouldn't say it's like a direct influence on Birdking specifically, but it's definitely, a big story for any of us. I mean, I grew up reading the books, and the movies were coming out when I was like in high school. So, they were a big deal for me, and, definitely left an impression. And, I'm not like a big Tolkien guy. Like I haven't read any other Tolkien books. I would fail a Tolkien, quiz or whatever. But the movies and I did read the 3 Lord of the Rings books. They definitely are like a big part of my, at least my childhood or teenage years. So
nice. Yeah. No, it's very cool. Cause I even caught in the second volume, when they talk about second breakfast, then I was like, ooh. No.
Oh yeah. Yeah, exactly. So leaning into that whole, sequence. And then by leaning into it, trying to, make an attempt to subvert it in our own way. So yeah, some people get caught up on that single chapter. They're like, it's, this is just Lord of the Rings. And it's just one chapter of the book is Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's no getting around it for sure.
Do you feel like because it is a dark fantasy that it gives you a little more creative freedom because it's set, like whereas like Undying Love's in a pretty gritty, realistic setting, you get a little more, I don't know, silly or just like almost like whimsically creative with it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I for the past couple of years I've been mostly writing fantasy stories. Raiders is a fantasy story. It's a dungeon raiders, kind of riffing on like dungeon crawlers. And so I've been loving fantasy and like really just leaning into that. But we for Birdking, I mean, for Crom and I in general, but for Birdking specifically, we sort of always said like the two godfathers of the book are the 2 Miyazakis, the Hayao Miyazaki and Hidetaka Miyazaki. So it's, Princess Mononoke and Dark Souls, essentially. And so, leaning into the whimsicalness of Hayao Miyazaki's, but then all like the dark fantasy, stuff of Hidetaka Miyazaki. And so those have always been our 2 main influences on the book.
Nice.
For those 2 guys. And their bodies of work, yeah.
That makes total sense the way you just described it. I mean, there are parts of the books where, there's a lot of gore and like blood, and it's like unexpected but awesome. Like the whimsicalness is still there, but then those parts are like, hell yeah. It makes it like, is it meant to be a young reader's book, or it just has those elements?
I mean, it's not specifically like for kids by any means, but I think a lot of it comes from Crom's art. Like his art, just brings this whimsicalness and it in this color. Like it's a surprisingly colorful dark fantasy story, the way that he colors his art. And so, yeah, just leaning into that, being open to it, ironically, I thought like we would have a more like, like teenage girl readership, but it's like, seems like it's mostly guys in their 20s and 30s. So go figure. But yeah, definitely, open to trying to get to younger readers if just for no other reason than growing our readership.
Nice.
Yeah. I see the Birdking figure behind you. That's awesome.
Oh, is that what that is?
Such a cool design.
Yeah. I don't know if this is audio only or if they'll do video, but there's a company called Mighty Jacks. They make vinyl toys, and Crom partnered with them to get that thing produced. And yeah, he's awesome. I had him at Comic-Con. I think maybe you saw him there. But there's a couple other figures they're going to come out too, like a big throne. One's coming out soon, and they're going to do a different color variant on this one that's like black and gold.
That's cool.
But yeah, he sells more books than anything. Like I put him on the table at a con, and he just like draws people over. So.
Yeah, it's such a great.
He's my booth babe. Yeah.
Mighty Jacks is good. I buy a lot of my figures up there are made by Mighty Jacks.
Yeah, no, they're quality. I mean, they're a little pricey, but they are really nice. So
yeah, no, they are.
You got to do good work. Yeah.
Hell yeah. So it is like when you write your books, are they, like, is there ever like, does it ever get like philosophical as far as like, is there like a message you're trying to get through to your books, or is it just to tell a good story?
I would say that I certainly have intentions with my stories, but I never want to let that get in the way of the story itself.
Okay.
And so if I am trying to say anything, I try to hide it pretty deep in there so that it's more like in the subtext or under the surface. I get really annoyed when I read books where like a character gets on a soapbox and starts talking to the reader and basically scolding them or telling them something. And so I do try to avoid anything like that. But I think any writer, they're always trying to say something. I mean, or express something. Sure.
Yeah. And because when reading it, and very undertones, but like, yeah, I could see like there being some like religious undertones or even just like critiques of religion undertones. And
in Birdking?
Yeah, I feel like volume 2 at least.
Mm.
Unless maybe I just
what specifically felt religious to you?
I felt like when Bianca's mom was talking to her about like following people and how they're the chosen people or have wandered for a while aimlessly and tried to prove themselves to the gods. I might have just been high and reading way too much of it.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, I like definitely with Kali and with Birdking, certainly like there's something I'm really interested in exploring creatively is like ambiguity. And so always leaving that space for the reader to interpret or kind of project themselves into things or read into things. And so I always love hearing people's reactions or interpretations. So that's interesting. I wouldn't say that I'm necessarily like making any grand statements about religions or anything like that. I mean, I just heard Crom chatting about how like he grew up Catholic. And so he's not religious now, but like he has that upbringing. And so he's sort of obsessed with like Catholic imagery and ritual and these kinds of things. And so I think all those things, they creep into the art, whether they mean to, but you mean them to or not. But yeah, I mean, I have certain sort of ideas about who the Sintered are, who Bianca's people were, because she's the last one of them. So yeah, just giving them their own kind of backstory in a world where everyone's following a leader. There are people who don't follow any leaders. This is the idea.
Oh yeah, it's great. It's very creative too.
I feel like talking about influences earlier, do you have Dune as an influence at all in your writing?
Oh, because of the chapter headings?
Well, so the chapter headings, and then also indirectly the way of the worm. Like that immediately, even though it's not like Dune at all, just that phrase made me think of like, walking along the sand, you have to walk like the worm.
Yeah, no, I'm a huge Dune guy, but nice. But specifically like just the books. I thought the movies were okay, but like I've been those original 6 Herbert books. definitely hold a special place in my heart. And I think that they have definitely made it like had an influence on me. And I mean, I would say like directly, like the chapter headings in Birdking are very much inspired by the chapter headings in Dune.
And I love
just this, and also Dark Souls to a certain extent, you know, this idea that you get to kind of have little snippets from other texts which exist within the world and kind of inform the history of things.
Yeah, it's a great way to world build. And I think you do a great job of world building everything in this. Like it was a world that was very easy to jump into. It felt recognizable, but it had a freshness to it at the same time. It definitely wants to make me read. So you're saying volume 4 is going to be the last. I would love to see way more than 4, but obviously you have a complete story to tell. I just really like the world you built with Crom.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I'd love to, you know, keep going. We've talked about things, but at the end of the day, these things take just years to produce. Like, you know, Birdking's going to be like the 500-page graphic novel, which is the 4 volumes. It's going to be like 6 years, you know, of our lives. And so, you know, Kali, which is only 150 pages, took us 7 years to get that book done.
Oh, wow.
I mean, I wrote it in 2 weeks, and then it took Robert 7 years to draw it, but you know, that's a different story. But so, you know, for us, it's just like a time commitment thing. Like you know, it's hard to keep on one thing for years and years and years. And I know Crom has a million different things he wants to do. And so even getting him to commit to, you know, 5-6 years on one thing is a big commitment. And so, yeah, we'll see. I mean, if the book takes off and does really well and it becomes worth it for us, you know, there's definitely more stories to tell, but the intention is for that single graphic novel, these 4 volumes, to be a complete story that hopefully is like totally satisfying by the end.
I'm sure.
We will see.
Yeah. Have you seen Crom's face, him in person?
Never.
Well, I see on Instagram he wears a mask, so he doesn't like.
No. We've known each other for it's been like 10 years now, 10, 12 years. We started chatting, I think in maybe 20. Well, I don't even know. We've known each other for quite a few years. I have seen his face, but I've been sworn to secrecy. I'm not allowed to even describe it.
That's cool. That's very Banksy of him.
Yeah. Or like Daft Punk, you know.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's, you know, it's always fun that people go to his signings and they encounter the mask and they come and ask if I've ever seen his face. I tell everyone I haven't, but I have.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I was also wondering, you know, the Dune thing is actually, I didn't even pick up on that. But then looking at like the armor of Birdking and all the other wraiths, and then what I perceived as the religious undertones, it almost has like Warhammer vibes as well.
Oh, totally. I know that Crom has a huge love for Warhammer and for 40K specifically. I've always loved 40K. I've just never gotten that deep into it. Like I couldn't answer any lore questions about 40K, but like I think 40K is awesome.
Nice.
And like everything about it is super cool. Like, have you seen the Astartes short film?
No.
Oh, okay. Go online. It's just called Astartes. And it was made by a single guy, and over like, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 years, he produced it all by himself. And it is the coolest fucking thing I've ever seen. Like,
really?
It makes everything else, every other like video and short film and kind of pale in comparison to like the way he did Warhammer. It's like the best rendition of the 40K universe. You'll like it.
I've honestly, that's cool. I'll check that out because of a lot of my friends are way more into it than I am.
Yeah, I did paint miniatures as a kid, but I never had anyone to like play the game with, so I just painted the miniatures and never even learned how to play.
Yeah,
but I definitely like.
That's what my friends do. They paint the miniatures still.
Yeah, I did get into that for a little while.
Yeah, it's crazy. There's too much lore for Warhammer. I just can't keep up. My friend was asking me to describe it. I was like, dude, I can't. That's impossible.
It's impossible.
Yeah. No, it's deep. It's kind of almost endless, I think, at this point.
Yeah, seriously. That's awesome. So did you grow up like, because you transitioned from screenwriting to writing comics, did you grow up a comic book fan?
Yes and no. I have this weird thing where like I've been reading comics my whole life, but I never read superhero comics.
Oh, wow.
And so it's always kind of been this like, it feels like 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Like I watched the X-Men cartoon as a kid, and also I'm like familiar with with the X-Men and I definitely know like the main pantheons of Marvel and DC, but I've never been a superhero reader. Like, 13 years old, 14, I go into a comic shop and I find like Sin City, and like
Nice.
there was no turning back. Like I've always been more attracted to like the European books, Mobius, Jeff Darrow, like all the non-Marvel DC Frank Miller stuff. I mean, I have read Miller's like Daredevil books, and those are great.
Yeah.
But so like I read a ton of indie books,
Nice.
ton of European books. I love comics, but I'm just not like, I've never been a superhero guy. And so I've always felt like an outsider within being a comic book reader. So yeah, I've always been reading comics, but not the comics everyone else was reading.
Nice.
No, I think that's awesome. I think there should be more comic creators like that, because like I feel like you could be very heavily influenced by all. Like I've read so many superhero comics, but I love indie stuff too and non-superhero stuff. But like I feel like you're just drawing from a different well, and that's just going to create different stories. But what would you consider your comic book influences in that case?
So like if I just turn here and I look at my shelf, what do I have? I mean, so again, like Mobius has always been my favorite, comic book artist. Like I mentioned, Jeff Darrow. Like I also love like some of the creators I love now are like anything Jeff Stocco does, Paul Pope, Brandon Graham. Basically every book Hodorowski wrote, like the Inkall, and all those books that he did with Mobius and even with other guys. Heavy metal.
Nice.
I grew up on heavy metal for sure. But yeah, I mean, I've always been more attracted to like the art than the stories.
Nice.
That was always my main attraction. When I was younger, I wanted to be an artist. I never intended to be a writer, but somehow, I don't know, life happens and you just whatever. But so I've always had my love has always been for artwork, and so I've always like followed the art more than the stories. But yeah, what else do I have?
Is that Invisibles back there?
Yeah, Invisibles, Stray Bullets.
Nice.
I just picked up like Luther Strode, the collection of that. I have all my Humanoids books and Mobius books.
I don't even know.
Sergio Topi, Drouillet. Like it gives,
You got
European mostly.
European. Yeah, that's crazy. I picked up one European book, this book called Paris 2119.
That looks gorgeous. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's really different. It's kind of like Blade Runner set in like futuristic Paris. And it's translated from French to English, but it's really different than a lot of the comics. So that's cool you said that. I'd like to get into more European comics too.
Yeah, I mean, so for me, it's like I've always loved art, but I've always been a huge reader of like prose, like fiction, like fantasy fiction. So I read like a ton of fantasy books. I read a lot more novels than I do comics, but then I just happen to work in comics. It's just, again, it's just weird how things work out.
That's crazy. Very cool.
But yeah, like I love, I don't know if you've ever heard of these, like the Black Company series by Glenn Cook. That's like my favorite fantasy series. It's a long running series. Just today I read that the Glenn Cook's he's like 100 years old, but he just announced 4 more books in this series. There's like 12 novels already. Nice. And it basically is this long running series that follows this like mercenary army in this dark fantasy world. And so you just follow them as they get employed by like different, evil villains. And they're always basically just trying to survive.
I like that.
And you follow the whole platoon of guys. Glenn Cook was a Vietnam vet who came back from Vietnam and was like, wanted to write about being a grunt in the trenches, but in a fantasy world. So it's this it's like in the mud, you're not following the hero prince. You're following the grunt on the ground who's just like trying to make it through the battle.
Damn.
So those books are awesome. I love Gene Wolfe, like Book of the New Sun, Shadow of the Torturer. I don't know if you've heard of that stuff either, but those are fucking great.
You're putting me on some game right now.
Yeah. So I mean, and also all the fantasy I read is like mostly like 70s, 80s, 90s stuff. Like I don't read anything contemporary. Like I've never read a Brandon Sanderson book, and that's what everyone like. Anytime people talk about fantasy, they want to talk about like Mistborn. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know about that stuff. So yeah, I don't know. I guess I do try to like drink from a different well,
nice.
For sure. So
no, that's cool. And then even like the names you come up with in Birdking for things like the Sintered, or just the names of these geographical areas, these people. it feels very fleshed out. It feels like it's old, like it's already had
lived in for sure.
Yeah, lived in, like a whole lore. It doesn't feel like you're pulling these names out of your ass when it's like it's flubba blue, and like it feels like oh, this shit's like there's some shit I need to read. So
yeah, for sure. I mean, well, thank you for saying that. There's one thing like I've taken from Gene Wolfe is like he uses all these crazy words for fantasy characters and weapons and all this stuff, but everything is real. It's all like it's either Latin or it's a different language or it's just some archaic word that's been lost. And so I'm trying to like not make up anything. I'm trying to like do a better job at like digging deep and finding like really cool unused words that have been forgotten for stuff. So something I'm working on.
No, it's cool. It really does feel that way. It doesn't feel like a forced to be creative for the sake of being creative kind of like world. It's
in fantasy, it's real slippery slope to like just start making up bullshit names for sure. Yeah.
No, for sure. Definitely. So when can we expect volume 4 to come out?
So we're like in the first quarter of volume 4 right now. We're a little behind schedule. We're hoping, hopefully by like this time next year. So in about a year.
Oh wow!
Yeah, we've been trying to do one book a year. It's been our schedule we're trying to keep. So if we can hit our deadline, it'll be out like about this time, like volume 3. So about this time next year. So yeah, knock on wood, we get there. But we're working on it now, and we're going to finish it as fast as we can. So it is 100. It's like a volume and a half. I ended up writing. We originally were going to do 3 volumes, and not only did we do 4, but the 4th volume is like a volume and a half long. It's 155 pages. So, so Crom is suffering under my scripting, but so it is longer. So it'll be a nice, big, chunky last book for sure.
Nice. I love that.
So like you were saying, it's one big story. Once all 4 volumes are out, can we expect like a nice like omnibus of everything in
hardcover edition?
Yeah, definitely. I want to do a oversized collector's hardcover, like a big, really nice, expensive one, and then I've been toying with the idea of putting it out in like a manga size, like softcover trade. That's much more affordable. Yeah. So there's like the collector's edition, and then there's the like the digest that anyone can pick up. I think it'll be at 500 story pages. It'll be a pretty nice, thick little book. Yeah. So, and I think Crom's art will look good in that size. A little smaller too. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are coming. Those are probably if volume 4 is a year off, those are probably 2 years off. So we'll get there.
Nice.
Is there any other comics that you're working on that you could tell us about, or any other projects in general?
Yeah. I'm currently wrapping up like another 5-6 year long project of it's a short story collection. So I did 12 shorts. They're all written by me, and each one has a different artist. Mostly all European guys. Nice. Almost all the artists I work with, except for Tom Coker, are European. Like Robert, who did Kali, he's Swedish. Crom's British, and I'm working with all these Italian guys and French guys, and
nice.
So that short story collection will be out next year, which I'm excited about because it's taken up forever. I thought like doing shorts it would be quick, this like thing I could pump out real fast, and it's just it's taken years to get it all done. So I'm just waiting on the last story to come in, and then I can figure out the publishing for that one. And then I'm actually writing my first licensed book. It's not announced. It'll get announced next year. But it's something in the fantasy space. And, so it's exciting to kind of like play with someone else's toys for the first time. And, that's awesome. and for me to kind of like, work, I guess, within the system a little more. So that'll come out next year as well. And, that should be pretty fun.
With these other foreign artists and creators, are the people that you have found and networked with, or that like through the publishing companies have linked you guys together?
Oh no, it's all my own reaching out to people, finding there's dozens if not hundreds of amazing artists on Instagram and online that you can find. Half of them are working artists, the other half haven't done anything, but they're really talented, and so it's a mix of some big names and then also some kind of newer, fresh, unknown people. So, But yeah, I mean, the way I kind of work is I tend to produce my books completely before taking them to a publisher. Part of the reason I like doing comics is, as opposed to doing like film, is avoiding the pitch process. Like in screenwriting, you go in, you go to 100 meetings, you pitch for months, you get in and, no one buys it or no one shoots. It's like, you wasted all this time. And so I just, after years of doing that kind of pitching and all that stuff, what I like about comics is that we can actually just, an artist and I, whether it's Robert or Crom, we can just sit down and do the work ourselves. And so we produce the books, and then we take them to a publisher. And also, once you've done the work, if it's any good,
that's true.
Getting published is 100 times easier than pitching a project and trying to ask someone to roll the dice on you. So that's another reason why they take years to do, is because like they're being self-produced. But I wouldn't really trade that, because it's again, I love the control and the freedom to do what we want.
Nice. That's some good advice. Anthony is currently writing his very own comic with a friend of ours who's doing the art, and it's coming out next year. So that's
nice.
Yeah.
Well, so I was going to ask, based off of what you said. So is it when you make any of your comics that you're saying you make and then you're showing to a publisher, is it something you're self-financing, like you're just paying for the art, or is it a deal you're working out with the artist where you're going to try to get this published, like pitching it with a completed project?
Each project is unique. If I happen to have some money, I'll pay an artist, and you have more of like a work for hire situation. Other times it's a partnership where we go in on the book together, and whatever treasure we find with that book, we split or share. And so I would say each project is kind of unique in how it comes together on the business end.
Gotcha.
But again, that's another reason why it takes so long, is because if I partner with someone like Robert, we did Kali, it took 7 years, not because it took him 7 years to draw everything, even though it's unbelievably intricate. But he has a full-time day job as a video game art director. And so he was doing Kali on nights and weekends as like a passion project. And so, it just, the pages will trickle in, you're lucky if you get, 3 or 4 pages a month. And so it just, at that pace, it just takes years. But, he's not interested in giving up his day job, because he's got a great gig. And so he does want to do comics, but he doesn't want to go, work for he's not going to make as much money in comics as he is in games, but so, yeah, that's another reason why it takes so long. And, so, it's just the long game at the end of the day.
Nice. And so you think having a complete, like, so when you said like having a complete, like, you don't mean that like one issue, like you mean like a whole run and then pitch it to a publishing company, correct?
Yeah. So when we Robert and I took 7 years to do 125 of the 150 pages before we showed it to anybody. And as we neared the final stretch of pages, that's when I showed it to Dark Horse. Raiders, which the book I did with Crom before Birdking, we had finished like 3/4 of it or 80% of it. And so before I showed it to them, I showed it. And then, but because of Raiders, Dark Horse basically said, you guys want to do more. And so we kind of showed them Birdking way earlier than we normally would, but that was just because of our relationship after Raiders. And so Dark Horse has been on board with Birdking since like day one, almost. Nice. Like they came on, we were like on page like 8, by the time and so they kind of asked us if we had anything, and we were like, well, we're starting this new thing. And they were like, we're in. So, nice. But generally, yeah, like the short stories, I'm finishing 100%, all of them before I do anything with that. So each project's different, but I do try to kind of get as far into it as possible. You can go and pitch with the first 5 pages or the first issue, but by the time you get 20 pages into something, like it's a shame to throw it away if no one picks it up. It's like, you might as well just keep going if you can. And that way you produce a book. I mean, whether you end up having to self-publish it or something, like having a finished complete book is the truest joy there is. Like, pitching endlessly and then having nothing to show for it is like, it just sucks. And you feel like a failure because you haven't produced anything. So at least if you make a book, you've made a fucking book, and that's the coolest thing there is. So
Yeah, no, that's awesome.
It just sometimes takes years.
Yeah, shit, that's good advice. Damn.
Yeah, I appreciate the insight.
Yeah, seriously. Well, dude, Daniel, thank you so much for coming on. This was awesome having you, honestly.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you guys for having me, and I'm glad you enjoyed the books.
Yeah, where can readers find you? Like social media handles? Where are you at?
I'm just basically on Instagram at not Daniel Freedman. I like to make it hard for people to find me. And then I do have a newsletter which you could find from my website or through my Instagram. My website's just danielfreedman.tv. And you can also buy all my books there. Or you can also just get them on Amazon or at your local comic shop. So whatever's easier for people.
Nice.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for coming on, Daniel, and definitely looking forward to more Birdking. Seriously.
Yeah, same here.
Cheers. Thank you, guys.
Hi, you're listening to Comics and Chronic, and I'm Jake FH.
I'm Cody Cannon.
And I'm Anthony Iannaccio.
And you can tune in every Thursday to hear new episodes of Comics and Chronic.
And make sure to follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Comics and Chronic. That's Comics, the letter N, Chronic.
We'll see you guys next week.
Woo!
Peace.